Hey everybody, welcome back to TK Tennis. In today's video, I'm going to talk about my top stories from week number 1 at Wimbledon 2025. So it was a pretty entertaining week to say the least, with a lot of upsets, of course. And before I get into it, let's first mention I'm going to probably butcher some names. So if you've seen the video from Nick from Intuitive Tennis about pronunciation and pronunciation police, I'm going to butcher some names. I don't know how to pronounce all the names properly. So if you're going to be the pronunciation police in the comments, like so many people have been in the past, I'm not a pronunciation expert. I don't claim to be. And while I do my best to learn the players' names, sometimes I just don't get it right, maybe even oftentimes. So be it. The other thing is, on these videos, you're always going to get a very sharp perspective from me. And that's not meant to be mean towards the players. It's just that I want to be blunt sometimes when it needs to be blunt. And I'm not going to hold back. And it's sort of, well, I'm going to hold back. I'm always going to try and be respectful, unless it's a player who doesn't deserve a lot of respect. And then at those times, it's going to be sharp. So if you can't handle sharp criticism at times against possibly your favorite players, then maybe these videos aren't for you. But that's the beauty of having a YouTube channel and not working for some big media company where you always have to sort of kiss up to the players and you really can't say what you feel, which is, as an example, the announcer that I can't stand the most is Hurkacz on the tennis channel. He is such a kiss ass. He never has anything harsh to say about any player, even when they deserve some criticism. And, you know, that's sort of par for the course. That's part of your job as a broadcaster, is sometimes you can't be as critical as maybe you would, but not with that guy, Hurkacz. He's just always a kiss ass. And I think a lot of people probably like him. I don't. So I know that's a little bit off topic. So let's talk about my top stories from Wimbledon. And let's start out the WTA Tour. The first one is a very positive development, is with Aryna Sablenka, who I was quite critical of after the French Open, and how just lack of sportsmanship and class after CoCo won the finals against her. And yes, Sablenka played poorly. So did CoCo, but CoCo won. And Sablenka was completely just, I called it disgusting at the time, her lack of class and sportsmanship. And I stand by those words. She was. But the beauty of week 1 of Wimbledon, one of my top stories is her apology. She went on Tennis Channel and ESPN and she did interviews, and she was incredibly self-reflective and gracious and very apologetic for how she behaved after the loss at the French Open. And for as much criticism as I gave her after the French Open, that apology that she gave, not just some sort of PR statement. No, it was really genuine. She talked about her growth. She talked about how she should have never behaved like that, and did it in a manner where she wasn't running away from it. She really leaned in, and that's what you should expect from any good human being, is to know when they were wrong, to apologize, and to do it in a manner that was total opposite of how she handled herself at the French Open. So I want to commend Aryna for a job incredibly well done, and a lot of other players who make that same mistake can learn a lot from how Sablenka handled herself and that apology towards CoCo. She even did a TikTok dance with CoCo and didn't try and apologize to CoCo via text message. She waited till she saw her in person. They did TikTok dance together, and it was just a class act. So as hard as I was on her, I was really impressed with her. Not that she should care what my perspective is, but I wanted to give her the credit because I was so harsh on her. Second topic was CoCo Gauff, her losing in the first round. And I did a video before Wimbledon started about how CoCo may never win another Grand Slam. And some people were pretty harsh, thinking that was not a very good take. But I could see that loss coming to Yastremska, I think it was, from Ukraine. The thing is nothing has changed with CoCo. She won the French Open, even though she didn't play great. But the time she's afforded by playing on clay with a slower bounce really helped her a lot. And it was no surprise with her really flawed forehand and how big her takeback is and how late she hits the ball and off balance, is that when she gets to a faster surface like Wimbledon, not surprising at all that it wasn't going to go well. and she lost in the first round. So that was one of the top stories, as well as CoCo losing, or that was a top story for the tennis media. I didn't think it was a top story because I didn't think it was a surprise. Now she goes to the hard court season, where she will certainly do better. But I still don't envision her winning the US Open. She may win, depending on the draws. She could win a smaller tournament this summer, and probably will, because she's just such a great athlete and such a great tennis player outside of her flawed forehand and her serve. So best of luck to CoCo. I still think she needs a lot of work to do on her game. I just don't know if the schedule of the tour will ever allow her to actually go through the kind of necessary evolution in her forehand that she'll need in order to win another Grand Slam outside of the French Open. Now, could she win another US Open? It's possible. Some people say she won the US Open 2 years ago, so she may win it again. The difference was 2 years ago is she was really young. And when you're young and you're fearless and your flaws aren't magnified as much, you just go into a match, and the longer you play on the tour and the more problems you have, you either excel like a Novak or a Sinner or an Alcaraz. You get to a point where you get into these sticky situations, and either you come out of them on top or you don't. And when the match is at its most critical junctures, you end up winning or losing. When she was young, she was fearless, so she won the US Open. But now this problem with her forehand and the serve is becoming like a mental epidemic. And it won't get better, because when you're youthful, you can throw these things off. But as you start to get a little bit older, these things start to be like PTSD, and they magnify themselves. So when it comes to tough situations or just even not playing well, she doesn't have a lot of confidence, have no fear. She doesn't have that anymore. She's starting to mature into a young woman. She has the PTSD from a lot of bad losses. She knows how poor her forehand can be, and it's going to be a problem, and it's probably going to get magnified and not lessen over time. So that was one of the stories. And the other story on the WTA Tour that I thought was a big story that was early in the week, Kunwen Zhang. Well, they know her in the locker room. I think she's referred to as the Queen. It's such a good nickname. So from Zhang, from China. She also lost, I think it was in the first round. And that was also not a surprise, because a very similar problem to what CoCo has, but not nearly as flawed. Zhang has just really big loopy strokes that require a lot of time. And when you're on a fast surface, especially at Wimbledon, on grass in the first week, when it's all grass and there's no dirt, the ball is skidding and sliding, and she doesn't have a lot of time. So she has a really big backhand and a really big swing on her forehand. So I call them out-to-out swings. So they go out and they stay out, versus a more efficient swing, which is in to out. Those are generally a little bit quicker. Alcaraz is someone on his backhand that has sort of a backhand that's out to out, and that can be a problem at times on faster surfaces. And that's the type of thing that Zhang had in the forehand, had during the first round of the tournament, is that those big strokes that she has are a liability, again, in the first week at Wimbledon. If you get through the first week, and as the grass in some areas starts to turn into dirt, the court starts to slow down, the balls start to skid less, and they start to bounce up a little bit more like a traditional court or hard court, maybe not like so much with clay, but it makes a big difference getting out of those first 1, 2, and 3 rounds, so that the court conditions slow up and play a little bit more like a hard court. Let's just say that. So that wasn't a surprise either. So I think that's sort of the 3 big stories on the WTA, at least my stories from the WTA Tour on week 1 at Wimbledon. Now let's move on to the ATP Tour. And let's talk first about Alexander Bublik. So Alexander Bublik won the tournament in Halle, which was a grass court warm-up event in Halle, Germany. And he beat Sinner. He also beat Medvedev. He also beat, I forget who else he beat, but he had a really hard draw, and he beat all those players. He was playing fantastic tennis in Halle, and he was the champion at Halle, playing incredible grass court tennis. And he lost in the first round at Wimbledon against Munar, who's more of a clay court specialist. Just to be upfront with Bublik, I've never been a fan of Bublik for his entire career, because he's been a little bit of a clown. and how he approached his career, breaking rackets all the time, just not taking matches serious. And I get it. The tour is hard. It's hard to be on tour. He's not a robot. He's talked about it. But just because of his sort of like petulant child behavior that he's had most of his career, I've never been a fan of Bublik, even though his talent is off the charts. One of the most talented players on the tour. And he had a great result at the French Open as well until he lost. Did he lose the center? I think he lost the center. And he was really giving it his all. His effort, his commitment during the French Open and at Halle were just really impressive. It was nice to see him get a lot of satisfaction from sort of, he goes through his career. He seems like one of those players that's continuing to play tennis more for the money than for anything else in the game or the love of the game or to be a champion. Oh, I get it. You don't have to love the game anymore. It's hard. Tennis can be frustrating on the tour. And I'm not expecting him to be, sort of in love with tennis, but I do expect most players, or I'd like to see most players, respect the game and respect their professions and treat it as such. And that's something that Bublik hasn't done. But his run at the French Open and his run at Halle, I was impressed because I guess he was playing well. And of course, he wasn't smashing rackets and he wasn't acting up. And he was just playing incredible tennis. And he really soaked it up. And it was wonderful to see for even someone who wasn't a fan of Bublik to see him sort of flip the switch and realize his talent, at least for a month or so, or at least a few weeks, was cool. It was really cool to see. But to see him lose in the first round to Munar was interesting. I didn't watch the match, so I can't really say what happened. But, the first match at Wimbledon on fresh grass is always hard. Wimbledon typically has the best bounce out of all grass court tournaments. So I don't know what really happened. I think Munar just played fantastic. I've watched the highlights, and it just seems like Munar was playing really well. But it was sad to see Bublik go out in the first round, knowing that he beat Sinner. And if he was playing at the level that he was in the prior few weeks, he was a real threat to go pretty deep into Wimbledon, maybe the quarterfinals, maybe even a little bit further. So that was a shame to see. Well, the next top story I had for Wimbledon was Marin Cilic, who just seems to come in and out of playing on the tour every now and then. Huge server, tremendous grass court player, but he's made finals of Grand Slams, moves incredibly well for like a 6'6" guy. Has a, kind of a little bit of a weird game sometimes, or weird styling. He's prone to missing some shots on big points. But he's the surprise because he's playing incredible tennis and he beat Draper, who, let's be real, he's been playing like the fourth best player in the world lately behind Sinner, Alcaraz, and maybe Novak. Draper has just been bullying people. But Draper got bullied by Cilic in that match. And for those of you, if there's anyone who's younger watching these matches, there's sort of a propensity in the world to think that today's players like Sinner and Alcaraz are just better than Novak and Federer and Nadal were, or even prior to them, like Agassi was. And people just think that the game keeps getting better, and these players today are even better than, the big three. And I want to point out that is not true. And maybe the overall level of the game has gone up between the top 10 players and the top 100 players. When you're talking about the top 10 players from today versus yesteryear, and by yesteryear I just mean 10 years ago, you can take Cilic as a great example. There were a lot of guys like Cilic, big servers, big strikers of the ball, who are incredible players. And Cilic just, really bullied Draper. So if you're out there thinking that today's players are better than they were in the past, don't buy into it. It's not true. I actually just watched a part of a match between Nadal and Agassi from about 15 years, no, maybe 20 years ago. 20 years ago. The level of tennis was absolutely extraordinary. Competing with today's level of tennis, without a doubt. So if you're one of those people that think today's game is better than it was even 20 years ago, maybe between 10 and 100, that level has gotten a little bit more consistent and higher. But the top guys are incredible. And Cilic, who's now been on tour 15 years or more, I didn't look it up, but he's been around for a long time. He's been a contender for a long time, and he can just come in and, you know, kick the shit out of some people that are 15 years younger than him, like he did with Draper. So that was a big story, and it's continuing to be a big story because he's still playing in Wimbledon in the second week, and you have to ask yourself, is he a real threat? And he is. Is he a threat to win Wimbledon? Probably not. Can he get through 7 matches healthy? But can he take out anyone? Certainly outside of Sinner and Alcaraz. The answer to that is yes. Can he take out Novak? I don't know if he's on the same side of the draw. He could take out Novak for sure, even though Novak is playing incredible tennis. And he is also a threat to actually win Wimbledon. And I'll get to that in a minute. But that's the story with Marin Cilic. I think that's a really big story. If he continues to play like he's going to, like he has been, he's going to go a little bit deeper into Wimbledon and potentially beat really anyone. I mean, he's even going to be a problem for Sinner or Alcaraz, whatever side of the draw that he's on. So watch out for Cilic. See how far he can go. And then you got Alexander Zverev, which, you know, he's had his struggles all year long, and his lack of intensity on the court is pretty obvious, and he's definitely dealing with some burnout and some other aspects, but his intensity is just not there. So he's going to have to find that during the hard court swing. Maybe he needs a break, but wasn't surprised to see him out. I think one of the other surprises or notable stories is who you didn't see at Wimbledon, and that's Hurkacz, one of the best servers in the world. Hurkacz from Poland. Didn't play Wimbledon. If you don't know why, he had knee surgery last year. I think he got hurt last year at Wimbledon and tore his meniscus or had some meniscus issues. And you've seen him wearing a knee brace earlier on this year. And it seems like the meniscus is not healing like it's supposed to. So he pulled out because his knee is still causing him some problems. And then the last ATP story I wanted to cover is Fonseca and Jarry, something that was notable, but also not surprising. Joe Fonseca, or Zhao, however you pronounce it. I know he goes short by Joe Fonseca. Sort of his nickname is Joe, and people think that he's the next coming and potentially a #1 player and a Grand Slam champion. I think I'm going to do a specific video on Joe Fonseca because I think I have a lot of interesting perspectives. But I knew the match with Jarry was going to be difficult. Jarry's a big hitter on grass, big server. And Fonseca is, I think he's still 18, maybe he's 19 now, but he's not quite there yet. And that showed in that match. So such a great, incredible talent with a huge fan base from Brazil. And the last two things I have for you is some upcoming videos. So I normally do, or I have been starting to do some predictions. I don't like to do predictions for the whole tournament. I don't pay that close attention to what's happening in the tournament as I should sometimes, and I don't have the time to do predictions for the entire draw at Wimbledon, but I will do some predictions. I probably will wait to the semifinals for the last 4 people, and I think I'm going to do a video again on can Novak win Wimbledon. That'll come out probably tomorrow or Tuesday. Can Novak beat Sinner and Alcaraz? I think it's going to be a really interesting video. But as of right now, we certainly are on a course for a Sinner and Alcaraz final, with Novak probably being the person that can make it the most challenging since he's on Sinner's side of the draw, and that is going to be a problem for potentially Sinner. But right now we look like we're on a Sinner-Alcaraz final collision course. I did not make a prediction that Sinner would win Wimbledon. I may make that prediction coming up in a few days, but I said he's probably my favorite after the French Open to win Wimbledon because of the difference in court conditions and how well Sinner is playing. So I didn't make that prediction at the end of the French Open. I just thought he was my favorite, and he still might be. But you'll have to tune in to that prediction when we get to the semis, and if it looks imminent that Sinner and Alcaraz are going to play one another. So that's it for today's video. That's the first week, my top stories from the first week at Wimbledon 2025. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. But again, if you're the pronunciation police, I really don't care. And if you can't handle sharp perspectives and criticisms, you probably shouldn't be watching me on YouTube. But again, I don't ever mean it to be disrespectful, or rarely mean it to be disrespectful toward the players. I just don't like living in a world where don't judge me. This don't judge me culture. I think judging people, especially constructively, doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, or you're a different race from one another. All that to me is nonsense. I don't buy into it. I treat people equally, no matter who they are, man, woman, any race, creed. I try and treat everyone with equal respect and constructive criticism. But don't believe just because I'm a guy that it's not okay for me to criticize or constructively criticize a woman's tennis game, which is all I'm trying to do here. I don't believe that don't judge me world, or the don't judge me generation. I think that's nonsense. I don't think that helps people build character and grow as individuals. And that's why I felt very comfortable calling out Sablenka after the French Open. When people behave poorly, we shouldn't embrace it. We should call it out, and we shouldn't tolerate it. And if they want to continue with that sort of behavior, that's completely up to them. Do what you want. It's your life, but don't expect there not to be ramifications from pundits, YouTubers, the general public. If you behave poorly, in my book, you should be called out for it. I think it makes it a better world, not a worse world, when we do that. So that's my thoughts for today. Thanks for watching, and I'll probably see you tomorrow on the Can Novak win Wimbledon video. I'll see you in the next ace. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.